welcome back to the Grindhouse Girls podcast. My name is Katie, and my co-host is Brittany. This week we will be talking about the movie The Nightingale, which is a beautiful film, but there is some graphic content in it, so we did want to give a listener and viewer discretion advisory. We will be talking about graphic content regarding violence towards women and children and violence in general. So if that is not up your alley, just want to advise you of that. If you are cool with listening to it, here goes the podcast.
Hi, I'm Katie.
Hi, I'm Brittany.
And this is Grindhouse Girls podcast. Woohoo! Yay! Episode 2. We're gonna try to just talk about one movie this time.
Yeah.
How are you, Brittany? How's life?
I'm good, Katie. I'm good. You know, we are living in a pandemic, and so I feel like we are keeping optimistic on our end. How's things going for you?
It's okay. I got to file for unemployment this week. That was exciting.
Oh goodness.
I mean, everybody is right now. Well, not everybody, but a lot of people are. So I'm furloughed, so I'm not fired and I have insurance. So it's not the worst case scenario. It was just funny. Everybody at my work is like texting each other, like, did you file yet? Did you file yet? Did you file yet? And it's just, I don't know. You have to laugh at it. But yeah, no, I'm fine. I was filming a baking video all day today, so I'm kind of full of baking stuff. I got to watch. Oh, I watched The Nightingale. I didn't get to watch it for a second time. I meant to, but I did make a lot of notes. Oh, that is the movie we're talking about, by the way, this week.
Yes.
It's called The Nightingale.
And it's Jennifer Kent's sophomore debut. Of course, Jennifer Kent is best known for her first movie, The Babadook.
Mm-hmm. I like The Babadook. It was cute. It wasn't cute. I don't know. It was like it was like a little movie. like it was nice and compact, and it was like, here's a story about this lady and her family, and that's it. And then it was done. And I like this director because she has said she will never do a sequel to that movie or any other movies that she does. And I'm like, good, thank you. Because there's nothing worse than seeing a really good horror movie and then seeing a sequel and it's awful. And you're just like, why didn't you just leave it at the one movie? I don't understand it. So, I mean, we can quote Saw and was it I didn't even see Paranormal Activity because I thought it looked stupid. I've seen the ending and I've seen parts of it, so I was like,
I will say this. I saw the first Paranormal Activity in theaters, and I think I was a freshman in college, and it did scare the shit out of me. And I think that's the movies like that. It kind of reminds me of the Blair Witch Project, not necessarily because it's the found footage. It obviously has that in common, but more it's just it scares on a very low budget, which, I mean, when
it's just jump scares.
Yeah.
It's just jump scares. Whereas the Babadook is like trying to say something. The Babadook is like about grieving, very much like not Midsummer, Hereditary. It's about grief and like feeding your grief, basically. But it's also about family. And the woman who plays the lead in Babadook, what is her name? I wrote it down. What is her name? Essie Davis, who is in a lot of stuff, but she was in this really awesome TV show. The first season, I don't know if it still is, but was free on Amazon Prime for a while, called Miss Fisher's Murder Mysteries. And it's like a 1920s Australian lady detective, and it's based on some books. But my boyfriend and I stumbled upon it a while ago. And we just was like, this is hilarious. It's like very silly, but it's kind of like Downton Abbey meets like an old-fashioned detective show.
Yeah.
I like it. Because it takes place in the 20s. So it's like everything's really pretty. And it's in Australia, which I don't know a whole lot about Australia, which is where this movie takes place because Jennifer Kent is an Australian person. She's from Australia. She's pretty cool. Would you recommend this movie before we get into spoilers?
I'm about to say something very controversial, and I'm sure a lot of our people who will turn into this will disagree with me. I say it's very controversial, but I actually enjoyed the Nightingale more than I did the Babadook.
Oh yeah, I think it's a better movie. I think the Babadook is more. What am I trying to say? Like, more people would see the Babadook because it's not very visceral. It's more approachable. But the Nightingale is definitely a better made movie, and it has a lot more production value, and there's a lot more heart into it, I think. I would definitely recommend it, but I wouldn't recommend it for the faint of heart because the first, like, 15, 20 minutes are real rough, and there's a lot of violence. But
Yeah.
it's realistic, and I like that about this director because she refused to take the violence out. Like, apparently people walked out of the theaters when they first saw this movie, and they were like, you need to take all this out. And she's like, nah, because it's realistic. And she had, like, counselors come in and say, like, is this realistic to what this would be like? And they're like, absolutely, this is very realistic. So she's not trying to be gross.
It's historically accurate too. And so I Americans, I don't know a lot about Australian history, and this movie actually did cause me to like look up a little bit about Australian history. And this was a period, this movie actually takes place during a period called the Black War, and it's something not even most Australian children are familiar with because it's kind of a dark time in that history. And so this is like,
although correct us if we're wrong, because neither one of us is from Australia.
The reason I brought that up is because Baykali, who plays Billy in the movie, I had seen a very short, like 3-minute interview with him because, of course, if we're mentioning these actors' names, I want to make sure I'm pronouncing it right. I feel like that's the right thing to do. And he never acted before this movie, and he was amazing in it. And
he also wrote all the music that he sang, by the way.
Really? And that is amazing. I had
Ganambarr. I'm completely guessing that's his last name. But yeah, he wrote all the Aboriginal music in it. So it's in 3 languages. It's in English, it's in Aboriginal Palawakani is the specific Aboriginal language, and then Gaelic, which well, I'll tell you, but I guess we'll say yes, we recommend it. If you want spoilers, keep listening. And yes, what were you gonna say about that gentleman? It was his first movie, absolutely. Oh, you're cutting out.
Yeah, it was. Oh, what?
Oh, oh, now you're back. Okay, cool. We're still recording over Skype, by the way, because pandemic.
Yes, exactly. He was a trained dancer, and so I was watching this very short interview he had given, and the lady who was interviewing was Australian too, and she goes, I think I remember learning a little bit about this in school, but I mean, what about you? Do you remember learning about this in school? And he's like, oh, it was something that was taught to me since I was a kid because this is my people's history. And I thought that was very interesting. That being an Aboriginal man living in Australia, this was something that was ingrained for him to know. But average Australian, it was like something that was touched upon. So right. I guess what I'm trying to say is this is a very historically, because that's not much talked about in Australia, even though it is a part of Australian history.
Okay. You're cutting out a little bit, so I'm like, can I edit this? It's okay. It's just anyways, but yes, so it's not something a lot of children get to hear about. That's a thing I think there's probably stuff in America too that talk about, although like I'm trying to think of something specifically.
Okay, I could think of something specifically. The oh my god, I forgot the actual name of it, but you got to watch Watchmen on HBO. And
I haven't watched it yet. It's on my list.
The Tulsa, it was early. Oh my god, it was in the early, like I think it was in the 1920s. But there was a Tulsa race riot, and there was in Tulsa, Mississippi. Yeah, tons. It was an African American city, and tons of African Americans were killed. In this just like riot that happened. And so that was something, when Watchmen aired recently, a lot of Americans were like, what, this really happened? So people were like looking on Wikipedia, and it was like one of the top hits on Wikipedia because a lot of people didn't know that was a thing that even happened in history.
So the movie's called The Nightingale. There's a lot of bird imagery, both with the main character, whose name is Clare, and Billy, who's, I would call him the other main character. He doesn't come in until like probably, a third into the movie, but I would call him the second character.
Like the protagonist, is that the word?
Protagonist?
Like, it's like protagonist and then like protagonist, is that right? Like the second primary character?
Dude, is there a term for it? I don't even remember.
I'm just like, did I dream this? Like,
I know antagonist and protagonist. I guess, okay, wait, before I get into music, let's I wrote all the character descriptions down so people know who we're talking about, because it's a little confusing, because I was going back and forth and trying to remember people, and I was like, who was this person? So there's Claire. She's an Irish convict. She's an orphan. She's a mother. She's a wife. She's a singer. And she's originally from Ireland, but because Great Britain owned everybody at this point in time, she's in a British penal colony in Australia, and she's married to a man named Aidan, he seems very sweet, but he has a bit of a temper, but not like against her, just like he's very protective. And then the antagonist is Lieutenant Hawkins. I'm kind of going like how we met them, by the way. Lieutenant Hawkins, by the way, the guy who plays Lieutenant Hawkins, who's the antagonist, is Finnick in the Hunger Games.
Oh, yeah.
I kept looking at him and I was like, he kind of looks familiar, but kind of not. And he was also the guy in the wheelchair. That sounds really bad. I just didn't see the movie because I like Emilia Clarke, but I didn't want to see a depressing movie where obviously he was going to commit suicide at the end or something. I was like, I don't need to see that movie. And I heard like a lot of people, but I heard a lot of people didn't like in the like wheelchair, like handicap community, like, or handicap, however you want to say, people who are mobility bound did not like this movie.
Oh my God, that's a discussion for a whole other video.
But ironically, it was with Emilia Clarke, who's in Game of Thrones, but then also the girl that plays Claire played Lyanna Stark in Game of Thrones. I was like, oh, that chick. Oh, and I realized she was also in The Fall. She was the babysitter in The Fall, which is a really good show too, with Gillian Anderson, and she's Irish in that because it takes place in Ireland. Then there's Billy, who I guess we don't meet him next, but I was like, oh, he should have been further up. But there's Billy, who's an Aboriginal tracker, and he kind of begrudgingly assists Claire. He doesn't like, he's like one of those people that the people he doesn't like kind of need his help, so he doesn't really want to help them because he's trying to be, separated from them because he doesn't like them because all the English people are killing his family and his friends and everything. And then he realizes Claire is also kind of enslaved, so they become friends. And then there's Sergeant Ruse. That's whose name I couldn't remember. I was like, that guy, the rapey guy, who the guy's name is Damon Herriman. Oh, did I even say their names? Michael Sheasby is Aidan. Lieutenant Hawkins is Sam Clafin. And Claire is, I don't know how to say her name because it's Irish.
It's as Aileen Franciosi.
Yeah, she's Irish Italian. So the last name I was like, oh, I get that. But the first name, Irish names are, and I'm part Irish, and I really don't know how to pronounce it. Unless you tell me how to pronounce it. But Damon Herriman, who plays Sergeant Rapey Face, as I like to call him, because all he wants to do is rape people, was Charles Manson in both Mindhunter and Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, which I just watched, and I was like, oh my God! Yeah. I mean, it's not. He's been working a long time. His IMDb list is extensive. I was like, oh, this man works. Oh my gosh. But basically, he just wants to rape everybody, and he's like an asshole. Then there's Private. I can't remember. They didn't really say his name, but Jago or Yago. I don't really remember how they pronounced it.
Yeah.
Played by Henry Greenwood, who was in Hacksaw Ridge, who the guy that played Aidan was also in Hacksaw Ridge, and I didn't really have any interest in seeing Hacksaw Ridge. I saw Flags of Our Fathers, and it really scarred me. So I was like, I don't need to see other World War II movies unless they say something different. Anyways, but I kind of felt bad for this character, kind of. I was very torn. He was like the gray area character because he's a very young private. He doesn't want to hurt anybody, but he's kind of forced to hurt people because he's a soldier and he has to do what he's told. And then my favorite, there's other characters too, but talking like actual like characters that have a plot line. Eddie, the little boy, and the child's name is Charlie Shotwell, who's been in like 5 or 10 movies, like a lot of movies. I was like, wow, this kid has a lot of jobs. He's like a little orphan boy who volunteers to help Lieutenant Hawkins, and he like takes him under his wing and then turns out really badly for this kid. So that's basically all the characters. But the Nightingale part, there's a lot of bird imagery. And I got really excited during the beginning of the movie because she's like walking. They set it up beautifully. She's like walking through the woods with her baby, very like vulnerable kind of thing early in the morning. It kind of reminded me of The Witch because like it was very like misty and like isolated and stuff. And she's like singing this beautiful song, but she also has a knife in her hand, so you know she doesn't want to mess with it. She do not mess with her. But the song she's singing is a song that I sang when I was a little kid in a children's chorus called I Nini. And I started singing along with the music because I was like, I know this song. I love it's an actual Gaelic folk song. And I had to look up the lyrics because like we sang it in Gaelic and I don't speak Gaelic, but it's a song I really like to sing. And I used to have the sheet music and I couldn't find it. But speaking of bird imagery, the whole song is about birds. It's little birds sleep. Sleep by the wall outside. The blackbirds and the ravens go to sleep, go to sleep. The robin and the lark, the wren and the thrush go to sleep, go to sleep. It's like a really pretty Irish lullaby. And I used to sing it in a children's chorus in Gaelic, and again, didn't have any idea what it was called. What it meant. I knew what the lyrics were in Gaelic. But they just tell you how to pronounce things when you're in a children's chorus. They don't tell you what they mean. They're just like, yeah, sing this cute little song in French and German, and it's very interesting. But I was really excited because I like that. I knew that song. It's a real song, and almost all the music was actual like folk songs. Like she sings one called Dainty Davy, and that's a Scottish and Irish folk song based on Robert Burns' poems. And there's a song called Maggie May that's from like Liverpool, and apparently the Beatles performed a version of it at some point. And so pretty much everything was a traditional, except for maybe the song The Nightingale. And then the guy who played Billy, Baykali, I hope I'm saying his name right. I don't know if I am, please forgive me. But he made up all the Aboriginal songs. It says created and performed. So I don't know if they're actual songs and he knew them or if he made up songs in an Aboriginal language. Not really sure. But I mean, what do we want to talk about next? The violence or I was gonna say, wait, before we get into violence, the bird imagery. Billy calls himself he calls himself a bird name.
Is it black? Like blackbird?
It's blackbird, but it's called Magana.
Magana, yes.
He calls himself the blackbird. And it's very like, so she's the nightingale and he's the blackbird, and they're like, they both want to be free, but they're both enslaved by English people. It's very beautiful. It's lots of imagery. I loved it. But anyways, let's go. I guess, what do we want to talk about next?
So I think we should officially get into spoiler territory. So hopefully, at this point, you guys have already seen a Nightingale, or you're pausing this video and you're going to go to Hulu, where it's currently at, and you're going to watch it. So
it's on Hulu right now under Adventure Movie.
Yes. So at this point, hands are off the table. We are entering into spoiler territory right now.
Yeah. Because I feel like the beginning spoils most of the movie.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's not a pleasant beginning to a movie. And I mean, I will tell one story. I used to, like, I was hanging out with some friends, and they went to watch, when I was like in high school, I was pretty young. And they went to watch this movie it's the remake of The Hills Have Eyes.
Oh yeah.
And there's a rape scene in it, and I started violently shaking and made them. I didn't make them turn off the movie, but they had to turn it off because it was like really disturbing me. But this movie has 1, 2, 3, 4, like 3
rape scenes.
But well, she's raped like 4 times though.
No, Claire's raped
There's
twice.
5.
I
think there's 5. Because Claire's raped by the guy, and then 2 men the second time. So it's in the same scene, but it's 2 men.
Yes.
And then there's another lady who's kidnapped to get raped once and then twice. So there's at least 5. They don't show all of them, but there's many rapes in this movie, and they're very realistic, and they're very. I mean, I can't remember if there was music going on or not. It was it was a pretty quiet movie when people weren't singing. Like,
yeah, and I feel like even the way it was filmed, so rape scenes are very, very hard to watch. And I know a lot of people that if there is a rape scene in the movie, they're very triggered. Obviously, there's reasons people get triggered, and that's completely understandable. But there are people, if there's rape scenes in movies, they will flat out not watch them. I think the reason that this movie was so important in depicting the rape, I know there could be an argument that it advanced the plot, but for me, it really took it to Claire's POV. Like, you're with Claire. Like, you're not, this camera's not focusing on the man doing it or on her and the man. It's literally focusing on her during her rape. And even the other woman that's raped, is the camera is focused on her. So you're seeing the true terror, the true pain. You're with them in the moment. And I think that's what's so harrowing about watching this particular movie and the rape scenes in it.
And it makes it not feel like it's there for shock value. Like, sorry, Rob Zombie, but Rob Zombie uses rape for shock value. My opinion. Sorry, Rob Zombie. I'm not a big fan of him because every movie he's in, he throws in rape for no reason. And often it's a no-name character that you just met. And it's very much like, if you've ever watched canon movies, they basically used to use rape just to show boobs in movies. And I mean, they're like trashy action movies. Like, they're not good movies at all. But there's an actress called Maria Sirtis, and she was in Star Trek: The Next Generation. I don't know. She's always wearing. Lieutenant Troy, maybe. I think she's the one that marries Jonathan Frakes' character eventually. Oh, spoilers for Star Trek that happened 20 years ago. Anyways, my dad really likes Star Trek, so I've seen a lot of it. But Red Letter Media, which is a show I watch, like a review channel that I watch a lot, they reiterated this story because one of them is obsessed with Star Trek, and they're like, she was in a rape scene in a canon movie film before she got the job for Star Trek. And, like, they wouldn't let her put a blanket on over her while they were lighting it because they're like, I gotta see your tits. And it was, like, real gross. And she, like, apparently talked about it at a fan meeting for Star Trek and started crying. And she was like, I'm so thankful I don't have to do movies like that. So those kinds of rape scenes where they're gratuitous just for boobs or sexual content, I don't like. But if it serves a purpose to the plot line and puts you in the right perspective, I wasn't bothered by this movie, even though it was extremely violent and it was extremely realistic. I think it put you in the place of how women were treated at this time in this period, especially in a combat situation. Like, I mean, I think for the most part, if you were in a civilized country, probably wasn't that big of a deal. I don't know, but I didn't live in the 1800s, but it was more rare. But if you're in war, like, think about like the Civil War, war makes people do some terrible things, not just murdering people, but a bunch of these men like haven't seen a woman forever, and it's not an excuse, but they think it's okay to just rape somebody because they haven't had sex in forever, which is really gross. And it's not all of the soldiers are like that. So the lieutenant whose power, he holds power over Claire because he's the person that's supposed to sign her papers to say, yeah, you're free, you can leave Australia or go wherever you need to go. Her husband already has papers. She's waiting for her papers. They're both waiting. He is an asshole, and he rapes her because he's jealous because he kind of has been taking care of her, keeping her from I guess, being treated more roughly because, you know, a lot of people did physical labor and she's just doing like maid work and singing. So she really has it. You can see the other women in the show. She has a friend, I think Luddy, and her friend's really nice, but there's the other lady that's like her boss who obviously hates her because she thinks she gets special treatment because she kind of does.
Yeah.
But I mean, that doesn't excuse it. But I'm just saying, like, she's getting special treated because this guy likes her and wants something out of her. She didn't do anything. He just wants her, and he's jealous because she got married to a convict and not him, I guess.
Yeah.
So he gets really jealous. She goes to ask for her papers, and he's like, no, and I'm going to rape you. And then she doesn't tell her husband because she doesn't want him to attack him.
Yeah.
He's a good husband.
This movie is a very interesting movie because Jennifer Kent made a very political statement in the most quiet way possible. I feel like when she made this movie, when she decided to depict scenes of sexual violence, which we don't often see without any kind of criticism. And of course, this movie received its fair share of criticism, but also how women and people of color were treated in the 1820s, and of course how this debate is still going on to this day about women's rights and how people of color are treated. So I thought it was very interesting that this movie takes place in the 1820s, but how many parallels there is to today's culture too. And she's never come out and said that, but I feel like it's something that can very much be taken away from this film too.
Yeah, it's very, and I think that's one of the reasons why they have the imagery of like birds. Everyone's heard of the book, like I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings. It's
yeah.
Very powerful book. And it also, I'm pretty sure it also has rape in it as well. Like
Maya
it's been a long time. It's been a long time since I read that book.
She was raped as a child.
Yeah.
And I believe it was her uncles that killed her rapist, and she didn't speak for years because of the shame that came with that. So
I mean, like, there's a lot of bird parallels because women were Claire is actually enslaved because she's a convict, and I mean, being a convict she stole like bread or something. Like she stole food. It's kind of like Jean Valjean in Les Mis. It's not like she like violently hurt somebody and that's why she's in a penal colony. She's just like Jean Valjean because he was also in a penal colony. That's how the play starts. I just thought of that. Sorry. And I think this was a similar to. It's actually before that thing. No, same time period. Yeah, close to the same time period, because it was in like the Regency period, so after Napoleon, which was the late 1700s. So yeah, so this is like similar to it's a little after Les Mis time period, but she's at a penal colony because she stole some food, just like she's Jean Valjean, only a woman. And then Billy, I got real bothered the whole time. So there's Billy, who's a tracker, and he helps Claire. And then there's Charlie, who's not his actual uncle, but he calls him Uncle Charlie because he's like a friend. He's an older gentleman who's a friend, and he's also a tracker, and he's helping the bad people. And I felt real annoyed. It was like when I watched. I know I'm a white person, and I can't say that much about racial slurs, but something just real bothers me when people call people that are older than them but a different race boy.
Yes.
I'm like, he's an adult man.
Yes.
Please stop calling him boy. It's so disrespectful.
It's bringing even subtleties like that. So when you're looking at Claire and when you're looking at the way these Aboriginal people are treated, it's a total disregard for human rights and just human respect. Because you see, obviously, with Claire being raped, I feel bad. I forgot the other, the Aboriginal woman who's raped, but you see that with her because
I can't remember her name. I don't even know if they say her name, honestly. She probably said her name, but it was it was when action was happening and I was more paying attention to what was happening to her. That was really depressing.
But you see that, spoiler alert, but it's bound to happen because the only other thing more abysmal than the rape scenes is infanticide. Claire's infant is killed. a toddler is left in the woods. We do not learn the fate of the toddler that's left in the woods.
I feel like somebody found him though, because
Yeah.
he wasn't with the men. I feel like, and he lived in he lived there, so I feel like hopefully he was found. Yeah. The infanticide, which I was looking up the director, and apparently one of her first like film jobs, she worked in television a lot, but one of her first film jobs was working with Lars von Trier, because she saw Dancer in the Dark, that Bjork movie, and I made a note, maybe that's where she got the baby murder a la Antichrist, because I haven't seen all of Antichrist. I've been like working. I really want to see it. It's just like I was like, it's another movie.
Yeah,
probably talk about. It's a lot. But I've seen the beginning scene where basically I feel like the baby crawls out a window.
Yes. So and that's the
baby crawls out a window, which is very sad. But it's Lars von Trier. Oh, I don't even know how I feel about Lars von Trier. I've seen a lot of reviews of his movies, and I want to watch more of his movies, but he also bothers me because he's one of those people that does like to do things for shock value.
Yes,
he says he's saying something intelligent, but is he, or is he just like the whole nymphomaniac? He didn't want to have simulated sex scenes. So like Shia LaBeouf, by the way, is in Nymphomaniac.
He is.
And the big, like, it was almost like a gimmick, like, oh, they're not simulated sex, they're actually having sex, and people are like, oh, I want to see this movie where they actually have sex. And there's another movie called Love by Gaspar Noé that does the same thing, which there's also for my sensitive audience, people cover your ears, but there's like an ejaculation shot scene where it actually happens, and I'm like, I don't know if I want to just sit down and watch that. But Von Trier does a lot of violence, but Jennifer Kent, I don't feel like she's doing it to shock people. I feel like she's doing it to tell a story, and she does quietly make a statement about violence towards people of color and people and females and just society in general, people who are downtrodden and treated ill by society in general. But I think that's in my opinion, I like people that quietly say their piece, make a statement without screaming. I have different opinions than other people, and I like talking about them nicely. I don't like the people that on both sides of political spectrums that are just screaming at the top of their lungs. I'm like, I don't hear you because you're yelling and you don't listen to the other person. I'm very much like, let's just have a talk. Let's all come to a middle ground. And I think the way she's telling this story brings a lot of things to the surface. And I'm sad that this movie wasn't recommended more. I heard about it, but I feel like the only reason I heard about it was because I like to watch movie channels, and I read movie gossip and stuff, I was like, ooh, what is the Nightingale? Ooh, what is that movie? And then I was like, oh, that's the girl from Game of Thrones. I think you're the one that said it was Lyanna Stark. And I was like, oh, she's good in Game of Thrones.
So I'm telling our viewers, I had told Katie this a couple weeks ago when we were first getting together and talking about this project that we are currently talking on. I said we were talking about the Nightingale, and I was like, oh my God. So I said, as soon as I found out Lyanna Stark had been cast for the 6th season, I was like, what the fuck? Let me find out who's playing her. And I started following Isley Franciosi when she had maybe 2,000 followers. And so I kept seeing her press for the Nightingale. I had no idea until a couple weeks ago that Jennifer Kent was the director. I just had no idea. I was like, oh, okay, she's going to be in a movie called The Nightingale. So.
I didn't hear Jennifer Kent's name never came up until I watched the movie and looked up on IMDb, and I was like, oh, it's the lady who did Babadook. Because, she hasn't done a lot of, she's very selective, it's like Daniel Day-Lewis. Selective actors and directors. Some directors will do any project that comes to them, and other directors are like, nah, I really want to wait for the right one. And she actually wrote and directed and produced this movie. She didn't just direct it, she wrote it, which I usually is red flag for me that I'm not going to like it, because a lot of times I call it a triple threat when you write, direct, and star in your own movie, and not in a good way, it's a bad way. Most of the time, you've got your rooms. some Mel Gibson movies, Mel Gibson can direct himself. I mean, Mel Gibson nowadays is kind of crazy, but way back when he wasn't a crazy asshole who was anti-Semitic, when he wasn't an anti-Semitic asshole, he could write and direct himself occasionally, and it was like, oh, okay. But most of the time, it's a bad sign when you see, especially a small movie, because it's a blind thing.
Yeah,
you don't see your faults.
We had a theater professor, I think, that actually referred to it as incest in filmmaking. When you're married to your vision.
Who said that?
Yeah.
That. Which professor was it? Tammy?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. I can see that.
It's like when you marry all these ideas, there's really no room to breathe because you're so wrapped up in how you see it that you cloud your own vision, essentially, is what happens. So
we did a lot of, we went to theater school, but our school, I guess we can say what school we went to. I don't want to dox us, but we live in Alabama, and we went to Montevallo, which is a tiny little, I guess not as tiny as it used to be, but it's a really tiny, really old liberal arts college in the middle of Alabama. It's literally the middle of the state, and it's a very strange little place, but its homecoming tradition is writing and directing your own musicals competitively. Yeah. It's competitive musical theater, and it's all in the same school. It's like a football rivalry, but it's the same. It's people from the same school fighting each other. I love and hate it.
And kids, we've been a Jeopardy question like 3 times now because we actually have the oldest homecoming tradition in the country too.
Entire nation of America. But we've done a lot of original theater. It's called College Night. In College Night, I was in 3 and artistic directed a 4th one, so I was involved in 4 of those. And then we also had something called the White Cardigan Club, which is like, I think it's a national thing where it's like a playwright club for like students. And I've been in shows where the writer was the director, and there's a show I was in particular, and on my side, the side that was producing the show was about a little girl, and it was the past 4 seasons of her life, and it was like spring, summer, winter, fall were all actual characters, and it was a very weird show, but it was my first show in that capacity, and I was really excited about it. I liked my part. I was like bitchy Regina George character, and I loved every second of it. But it was a weird show, and at the end of the show, she's like, these were the last 4 seasons of my life. And everyone else in the audience thought she had died at the end. And none of us saw it because we were in the show and we all knew she didn't die. Yeah. But everyone was like, why did she die at the end? And I was like,
it's like, oh shit, that took a real dark turn there.
I was really confused because I was like, what do you mean? Why did she die? And I was like, she didn't. And so like, from my experience, it's not, you need outside people, but some people like Jennifer Kent, and I can't think of another one that I actually like, but like Jennifer Kent can write and direct her own stuff. Although I'm glad she doesn't star in it, because I think that's where you start getting into bad, when you're doing too many things at once. I just don't think you can give all your energy to the direction, or you're just stretched too thin. Yeah. But no, it's very well, and I like that she wrote and directed it because it's very personal. It's kind of like, well, this is going to be controversial, but Lin-Manuel Miranda, I think he's a really good writer. Everyone's going to hate me because my sister, I said this to her once, and she was like, how dare you besmirch the name of Lin-Manuel Miranda? I don't dislike him as a person. I think he's a really good writer, and he's a really good performer with music, but his acting is a little lackluster in my personal opinion. And I watched a bootleg copy of Hamilton because someone put it on YouTube, and I stayed up until 3 a.m. watching it because I was like, someone is going to take this off YouTube because they have taped Hamilton like 3 or 4 years ago. They won't release it until 2021 at the earliest, which is BS, because now we're all in pandemic, and like, let us watch it.
I love Lin-Manuel Lin-Manuel Miranda, and I love Hamilton the play. But I will say this, and this will be my piece on it. If I was to be cast as any character in that show, which I'm not a singer, God bless me, but I would want to be Burr. Like, I'm just like,
oh, Burr's more interesting.
oh,
Definitely.
Burr is so cool and phenomenal, and I just think he gets some of the best songs in the musical too.
But and that actor's gotten a lot of work since then. He was like the Nationwide commercial. I was like, what are you doing to Santa Nationwide commercial?
Leslie Odom is that
Leslie Odom Jr. Well, so I was watching it, and again, I'm sorry I watched the bootleg copy. I did not upload it, and I don't live in New York City, so I didn't have access to it. But I'm watching it, and Lin-Manuel Miranda has two acting. He has annoying, loud boy, and angry, and he doesn't really have a sad or anything in between. He doesn't have a variety, and I'm not saying that he's a bad actor, because there's some people that, like Keanu Reeves, he can do one thing, and if you cast him in the right role, Keanu Reeves is perfectly passable. But if you cast him in the wrong role, he's not. And Lin-Manuel Miranda doesn't have a lot of nuance to his acting style. So for me, I want that, because the play's about Alexander Hamilton. I was kind of like, okay, I just see Lin-Manuel Miranda. I don't really see Alexander Hamilton, but okay, because I love history, by the way. Like, I'm a real big history buff. 1776 is one of my favorite musicals. I can't wait till I eventually get to do it. I got cast in it, and then they canceled the show last year, so I'm real sad right now. But I really want to do it. But honestly, the better characters were the women in Hamilton performances. And then my favorite character, well, not my favorite, I think Eliza and her sister were my favorite characters, but the guy that played George Washington,
oh god, amazing,
shop him in New York City. Oh my god, what is his name? Christopher Jackson. He is like the nicest dude ever, and I only didn't get to sing their birthday. Not gonna say their name, but
Katie.
anyways, what I was really trying to say is Jennifer Kent is very good at writing and directing, whereas some people stretch themselves too thin. Sure. And we're gonna try to wrap this up in like another like 20 minutes. So
yes.
Let's see. Did you have another point you want to talk about, Brittany?
Yeah, I actually would like to talk about a few scenes of this movie, because I don't know if you feel this way about movies, but every time I watch a new movie, there will usually, if I enjoy the movie, and I did enjoy The Nightingale, there will always be one or two scenes that always just stick out to me. And they're the scenes that when I'm like talking to a friend and I'm trying to tell them about this movie, and I'm trying to be spoiler free, but I'm just like, well, you just have to watch this one scene, and blah 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 blah. And I don't name names. But one of the scenes that stuck out to me is that so you have Clare, and to give a kind of recap of what Katie had said earlier, Clare tries to get her papers. She gets raped. Her husband goes to the guy Hawkins, and asks for the papers. Hawkins turns him down. He gets drunk that night, as in Claire's husband Aidan does. He gets in the fight. They decide they're going to run away in the middle of the night. That doesn't happen. Hawkins goes there. He rapes Clare. Jago, who is like his private, he screams at him over and over to try to quiet the baby, and in panic he kills the baby. Claire's not. Yeah.
he tries not to kill the baby. That's why I have a gray area with him, because he tries not to kill the baby, but the baby won't shut up, and he literally throws the baby against a wall. And it was less violent than I thought it was going to be, but it was still really jarring.
I mean, it was awful, but and the thing is, if you can go into this movie blind, I think it's awful. But if you kind of go in this movie with a very base of like, I don't mean to sound like, oh God, infanticide isn't awful, because it absolutely is, and traumatizing to see in any form of art or media. But my worst fears was like this baby's head was going to be bashed or something, and
I thought it was going to happen. Like, I don't need to see that. But also they have fontanelle, so they probably just hit him too hard in the fontanelle. And
that's what I'm just like, in my head, I can rationalize it. Okay, that's a rag doll that he just froze against the wall in that scene.
Oh,
and and I'm like, okay, I can like live with this. Like, not in the context of the movie, but and what's happening. So of course this throws into action Claire's revenge plot. And I think there's this very nuance. It's almost like this, what's the word I'm looking for? It begins her journey, and at the beginning of her journey, she is absolutely rageful. Like, she is living, eating, breathing, sleeping to get her revenge on these men. And she hires Billy. Billy's the Aboriginal man who becomes her tracker to get her to, because there's a race against time to stop Hawkins from getting this promotion. Anyway, this is all into the,
because he got denied it because there's a guy who's not an asshole. He's kind of an asshole, but there's a higher ranking officer, and I didn't write his name down, but he is visiting, and that's why the Nightingale performs. And he figures out that Hawkins is raping people, and his assistants are drunks, and they're really rude to women, and they're just terrible men. And so he's like, you're not getting a promotion. So he tries to race to the next town, which is through the jungle or the forest. I don't know really what they call it in Australia. It's more tropical than America, but through the woods. We'll just say through the woods. They're into the woods. Yeah. They have to go through the woods by a certain, like in like 3 days, something crazy, where it usually takes like 5 days, but they have to go the dangerous way to get there. So she's trying to catch up to them before they get there.
And that's where it leads to the scene where Katie had touched upon earlier, where they find an Aboriginal woman, her toddler. They kidnap the Aboriginal woman, leave the toddler, a little boy, just in the woods, and they take her and they rape her. And so the next morning, they're like tying her essentially to like the wagon or one of the horses, and the tribe of men come and find her. A fight ensues, and Yago, who is the young private that throws Claire's daughter against the wall, he gets injured. He runs away. Well, Claire catches up to him. And to me, this is a scene that, when I think of this movie, like, everyone brings up the rape. And this is the scene that really just stuck with me. And I think it was harrowing. We have talked about how realistic the violence is in this movie. And Claire, Jago, if I'm pronouncing his name wrong, he's already injured. And he essentially begs for his life. And she stabs him. And when she stabs him, it's like you see each stab of the knife, and it just enters his body. And it's a very
really good sound. The sound is it was the queasiest part of the movie for me. Everything else I was kind of okay.
Yeah.
Rough, but okay. And then I was just like, oh, she's really going for it. Yeah. And I mean, doesn't she like smash his face in too?
She does. She takes, and I think that's the scene that's just like absolutely, I could feel like, I realized when I was watching this, I had caught my breath and I was holding it. Because she takes like the blunt of the gun and like smashes his face. And when it happens,
he smashed her face with it too. She knocked her out with the same gun. So,
Exactly. But when it happens, his face like ricochets, and his eyes dull, and he says, "Mother," and it just, when he says, "Mother," and when you study history, and all throughout history and time, you hear these stories about men dying on the battlefield, and they cry out for their mom when they're dying, and you see Claire break down when he says that, but she does deliver the final blow to him. and kills him. And I sit there and I think about that scene because I don't know what Isley was feeling as an actor in that scene, but all I could think about is like this man killed her child, but she's essentially killing another woman's child. And there's
yeah.
There's such a power to that scene.
Yes. And then also Billy has no idea why he's helping her, by the way. He starts out helping her. She says, "Oh, I need to go catch up to my husband." So he thinks this guy is her husband and that she's caught up to him. And then she starts murdering him in front of her, or murdering him in front of him, in front of Billy. And he's just like, what the hell's going on? But he ends up sticking with her, like, because they start talking in their own native tongue and like singing songs, and they're like, oh, we're in the same predicament. We're both English slaves, basically, because English enslaved a lot of people for a long time.
Yeah.
And we're both in the same boat. So he decides to help her instead. And the other thing about the whole mother thing, too, was a lot of movies wouldn't do this, but she's a young mother, her child. Honestly, I was kind of confused because the baby looked like they were like at least 15, 16 months old. Like they were well over a year old, but she was still nursing her. And
I will say
they actually...
Sorry, but to continue that thought, so in poor countries and back in the day, mothers would often nurse their children to 2 or 3, just because they could be providing a food source, and because resources are scarce.
Yeah, I was gonna say that. I was like, probably people were nursed longer because she wasn't very rich, so probably was easier to not feed her. What was I trying to say?
Oh, you were talking about nursing.
So she's still nursing her, which again, I was like, oh, she's kind of old, but it makes sense way back then. Anyways, she's nursing her, and a lot of movies would have the baby die, and the mom's just emotionally sad. But she's also emotionally in pain, but she's physically in pain because nobody talks about the fact that when you're nursing and you can't nurse, it's physically painful to not nurse. Like, it is really hard to stop because, I mean, you can't just tell your body, oh, I don't have to nurse anymore. It's actually physically painful. And it was realistic because nobody ever talks about that. Whenever you have movies where a baby dies, they don't talk about that shit. They're just like, oh, yeah, no, don't worry about it. But I mean, like, she's like leaking all over the place, which is like the most embarrassing thing, and also like so sad because she's like, she can't nurse her kid, and she actually physically gets in so much pain she like passes out at one point.
Yeah,
because it is really painful to not nurse. So a lot of people, like, the one thing all my friends when they had kids are like, oh man, breastfeeding is like not the worst thing, but it's a lot of pain associated with it that you don't understand until you have a kid. So I appreciated that not only was she being realistic, like this is what would happen. She's trying to do this mission, but she also has a physical thing that's going to get in her way. It's kind of like how people always like forget about like apocalypse dramas, like they forget to talk about like periods. And, it's like people that wear contact lenses and things. I'm like, I wear contact lenses and I'm a woman. I'm always like, if I was in The Walking Dead, would I just have to wear my glasses? And what do you do about tampons? They don't talk about that shit, but she did because she's a woman and she's not afraid to talk about the fact that it's not just emotionally painful, but it's physically painful. And it was a nice juxtaposition. Like, she couldn't even move past losing her child because her body's going to remind her of that for a long time. And then Billy ends up helping her out by, like, I don't know if anyone's heard of, like, the cabbage leaf thing where people, like, put cabbage leaves on them to stop them from having to nurse, but it was basically, like, that kind of trick with herbal stuff. So, I mean, I thought it was a nice touch that they didn't have to do, but I thought it made it more realistic and something people probably wouldn't think about.
Yeah, and I thought another thing pertaining to Claire's baby that we never know the name of the baby. But pertaining to Claire's baby,
she said it, but I couldn't find it. I feel like she said her name to her husband, like, if I lost you and whatever the baby's name was. But I couldn't. I tried to look it up, and I didn't feel like sitting through 3 rape scenes again to figure out what the baby was. So
I thought she had like a pet name for her, like, like she called her sweetheart or something among those sentiments, but I can't remember her actual name. But she has this PTSD. And the one time I could really feel like Jennifer Kent's signature is that PTSD nightmares, and those are very Babadook-ish scenes to me. That's where I'm like, okay, I can see this being the same director. Other than very similar themes in both movies. But Claire hears the crying of her baby, and the idea, I think, of as a mother not being able to comfort your baby, I think is something very traumatic. And the thing is I feel like you see Claire at her weakest during these things too, when she can hear the babies crying and there's nothing she can do about it. So
she has a lot of nightmares too, which I thought was interesting. I don't know, okay, so generally speaking, I really like this movie, but I had some critiques. It wasn't perfect. Especially, I didn't really, the nightmares were, I just kind of thought they weren't completely necessary.
They didn't feel, the way they were filmed didn't film right in the context of the film.
Yeah, and also it's a very realistic movie, and then all of a sudden she's having nightmares, and it gets a little weird. And Babadook does that too, where she has a lot of, maybe it's just Jennifer Kent likes this, I don't know, but there's a lot in Babadook where you can't figure out if she's dreaming doing something terrible or actually doing something terrible.
Yeah.
And I was really confused. I was like, is this happening? But then she like saw her dead husband. I was like, okay, or not. But the other thing was the ending kind of went on a little too long. It was like, she kills Jago, the private, and then so they're still left with Uncle Charlie, who's a good guy, but he's having to lead Lieutenant Hawkins and Sergeant Ruse, the rapey guy.
Yeah.
And then the little boy Eddie, who like there are a bunch of like creepy guys that decided to help them. And so the little boy's like, oh, I'll help you out. And the lieutenant at first is like showing humanity, like kind of being really nice to this little boy. And then he starts telling him like about, like basically telling him like, it's okay to shoot people and it's okay to rape people. And that's all okay, son. And you're like, oh no, this is not good. He's like grooming him to become an asshole. And like a terrible person too. And then, so she's still stalking them. They're a couple of days behind them. And then they catch up to them. There's a confrontation. He kills Uncle Charlie because Uncle Charlie is like, y'all are a bunch of rapists and I'm gonna lead you into nowhere. And he leads them to the middle of nowhere and like laughs hysterically at them. It was kind of like if you've ever seen Mandy, like the scene in Mandy when she's laughing at that guy's tiny dick. It was like he's just laughing hysterically and they kill him, and it's really sad that they kill him. But I love that he went out swinging, like he tricked their asses. Yeah. It was great. I was like, I love Uncle Charlie. But so they kill Uncle Charlie, and the little boy is really like, oh, that was awful. And they are somehow Billy and Claire get separated, and Billy's with them, like they kidnap him, and basically the little boy is told to shoot him, and he can't. So then Lieutenant Hawkins kills him. So we're just left with Lieutenant Hawkins and the bad guy, and Claire and Billy run off. And then this is the part I didn't like. That all was okay, even though it was kind of getting like a little running on, but I was like, okay, well, this is leading to something big. Then Claire finds them in the town. They make it to the town. He gets his promotion. She confronts him in front of a bunch of other soldiers, and she sings a song and talks about how much of an asshole he is, and then she just leaves. And I was like, but then nothing else happens, and I was like, okay, is that it? Is that the end? Okay, that was I was like, oh, it's kind of anticlimactic, but maybe more realistic. Okay, but then they have another ending where Billy paints on Aboriginal war paint and goes and murders everybody, and then he gets shot, and then he and Claire escape to the ocean where she sings a song as he's like dying on a beach, but very peacefully, so they're both free. But it's just like, there were a lot of, it was like they could have ended the movie 5 different times, and I was just like, I feel like she should have picked one of those endings and went with it. It was a little, it ran on. It got kind of boring in the middle.
I feel like it did. The runtime is extensive on this movie, so we're talking about like a 2 hour and 15-minute movie. So I would agree with that. But what I liked about the ending, and I know what you're saying, you're like, okay, it could have ended here, but it could have ended here. What I like about that, though, is that when we're looking at this movie as Claire's journey, she starts off being very rageful. And then after she kills Yago and after she becomes closer to Billy, she is not completely healed, but in a way she is healed by his friendship. Which sounds really corny, but there's no other way for me to really put it. She's kind of healed by this person that has a very incredible likeness to her. Like they have nothing in common, but they both are struggling with they're both struggling with this PTSD. So what?
Not cute. I said it's cute, but I was just like, I don't know, it's sweet. It's like they both Billy, it's not even like a sexual thing. Like he does obviously care about her. At one point they're laying at a fire and he I think holds her hand or something. It doesn't get sexual though. He just sees in her a kinship and she sees in him a kinship, and he takes on her problem. But he's also searching himself because he finds out when he's with her that his whole tribe that he was going to go meet up with, they're all gone. His whole family's been murdered already. They run into some other people and they tell him, some other Aboriginal people, and they're like, oh no, he's like, oh, my family's from here. And they're like, oh, all those people are dead. And he's really upset. So he's kind of getting them both freedom by killing them. And it's more of symbolic because he's not really getting freedom, but by helping her, he's restoring some kind of glory to himself and his family. He's taking it back for them too.
And I feel like he takes on a little bit of her rage because Claire, and this is a very controversial opinion, but Claire, in a way, because of her relationship with Billy, she takes the high road, and kind of in a way, like she's still like, shames Hawkins in front of his superiors and stuff, but she is like, and when she sings that Gaelic song, it's kind of like she is saying, like, I'm not going away. Like, my legacy and my country's legacy will last long beyond what you could ever do to us. We're going to go back to we were talking about the ending of the Nightingale, and so I'm going to circle back to that real quick to wrap up and let you wrap up, you two.
You were talking about how she took the high ground.
Yeah, and that's exactly, so Claire essentially, with that ending, and I know you were talking about, what I liked about the ending, I do agree with the runtime is a little, it's a lot, like we had talked about. It's about a 2-hour and 15-minute movie, and I don't know, I couldn't imagine what would be cut, but I mean, I understand what you're talking about. The ending does feel a little long. You feel like there's multiple ways it could wrapped up. What I do like about the ending, though, is that Claire essentially takes, I feel like, after she kills Jago and after her relationship with Billy kind of flourishes into this, like, I don't want to say like it's a buddy movie, but I mean it's the closest I've ever seen to a horror movie being a
It's like a buddy cop movie, but there's lots of rape.
Exactly, and violence. Yeah, but after this relationship, she kind of, I feel like, and I guess you see this too in the movie, she kind of gets a protectiveness over Billy, and I think it's because it's what she has left. And so
and she's in an awkward position because when people don't know that she's a convict, they just assume she's a white lady, and at the time, the class system was completely out of whack. So she feels very protected because there's a scene where she and Billy run into a group of white men with black men in chains, so enslaved men, and she has to act like Billy's her slave, and she's like holding a gun to his head. But when you have to protect somebody, like, I don't know, it's just sad, it's just upsetting. And like there was a time in the world where, like, if you were white and you weren't a racist, you had to like almost pretend to be a racist to protect
your friend. You had to keep your head down. You had to keep your head down because going against the grain was something that could potentially it could get you killed and could get your family killed. And so a lot of people were put in this place where it's like, do you take care of yourself and your family, or do you do what's better for the sake of humanity? And it's
And I
just
guess
really
we could argue that she doesn't have a family anymore, so maybe that's why she's acting like that, but I don't think so.
that way. I feel that way. I really do. I feel like she, over the course of the events of the movie, she feels such a kinship with Billy that she does see him as her family. And there's a lot of different things that allude to extended family, especially with Billy and Aboriginal people and Charlie, like you said, like he's Aboriginal. He's not really his uncle, but because they have a kinship together, he calls him his uncle. And in a way, I feel like there's a kinship with Claire, and they bond together. And so Claire feels protectiveness over him, which brings me to the climax of the movie. So Claire, at this point, she takes the high road. She confronts Hawkins, but she leaves. And so her and Billy are resting with the scene Katie was talking about earlier where Billy holds her hand. They're resting in the woods. And it alludes back to this earlier moment in the movie where, they're talking about bad men. And Claire essentially says something like, "What do you do?" And he's like, "We kill them because, you can't change them. You kill them."
Yeah.
And I feel like, in a way, Billy takes the revenge. Like, he's not just taking his revenge, he's taking Claire's revenge. And he kills Hawkins, he kills Ruse. And there's all these different elements to this movie. But that's the main thing, is that there's this, it shows, I think there's this great conundrum, or this great question about who was right. Was Claire right to take the high road, or was Billy right to do what he did?
Although I think it ends. So it ends. Billy's been. So while he's killing the two guys that are left over, Ruse and Hawkins, he gets shot in the stomach, which is never a good thing, especially back then. It's possible you could survive it back then because the bullets were just hit you. So maybe he's gonna be okay. But it doesn't really tell you that he is. It doesn't tell you that he doesn't die on screen. So we can pretend whatever we want to pretend. But basically they run off with her horse. That the other thing, she had a horse, and it was like her husband worked a really long time to get this horse, and so she keeps like having to bring her horse along too, and that was kind of sweet. I like horses, so I mean, everybody likes horses, but we lived in Kentucky when I was a little girl, and we lived next to a horse farm, so I used to ride horses when I was like a teeny tiny child, so I can still ride them without falling off. What?
I said I just love animals, and I wonder subconsciously that's another issue with the Babadook, is spoiler, they kill the dog, and I'm
I don't like that part. I like to pretend that was just a vision and it didn't actually happen. But they end the movie on the beach. She's singing a song to Billy as he's kind of laying there injured, but they're both at peace.
Yeah.
And it's nice because both of them have been struggling this entire movie to find freedom, to find peace, and they're both orphaned and don't have families, but they're their own family now. And I mean, I really hope Billy does survive because I don't want Claire to be left alone again.
Yeah.
But they don't tell you either way. They just they're both sitting on the beach and the sun's rising and they're at peace with whatever happens. And it was a very good ending. I kind of think maybe they're just gonna wait there until they caught up with them, honestly. But it was good, and it was a little meandering. I wish it was a little bit more to the point, like maybe cut down the walking through the woods thing. Because even though like they were bonding, and that was nice, like their relationship was very good. The two actors did a good job because they don't like each other at the beginning. But it wasn't like that silly thing where people just hate each other for no reason. Like he thinks she's a stuck-up English lady, and she's annoyed because he keeps calling her English. She's like, "No, I'm Irish," and she's just angry, but she's also lying to him.
Yeah.
The whole time. And then when she finally opens up and she's like, "This is what actually happened," he's like, "Okay, I'm here for it. That's fine." They do bond, but I feel like maybe they could have either taken out the nightmares part.
Yeah.
I feel like that would have been okay. But yeah, so we're gonna watch the Vavitch and see if we like it. And if you haven't seen the Vavitch and you want to watch it before we review it, it'll be the next episode. It was on Netflix. I think it's still on Netflix. I want to say, or maybe Hulu.
Netflix. It's definitely on the streaming. It's either Netflix or Hulu, because I remember thinking like, "Oh, the Witch is on here." So the Witch is here. So
it's got like it either will have the name or it'll have like a little goat on it if you're trying to find it.
Black Phillip.
It came out a couple years ago, and it's a premiere for this director. So it was his first movie. So
okay, and we have
really
to. We'll talk about this in tomorrow's episode, but I do have to bring it up that David Eggers, who directed The Witch, is he was a theater kid, and because of that, his attention to detail is incredible.
I feel like it's a good thing to do right after Nightingale because they're both I wanted to talk about them both at the same time, but I knew we would run out of time because we've already run out of time and we only talked about the Nightingale. But they're very similar and they're both about a female character in an oppressive society. And they have immense attention to detail, especially with language, because like they actually speak in Gaelic. And I don't know, I'm not fluent in Gaelic, but I've sang in Gaelic enough to recognize it. It's a weird thing when you sing in children's choruses and I used to sing classical. I was like classically trained by my voice teacher in high school. You sing in a lot of different languages because the only English has only like America's only been around for so long, and English sounds really boring compared to like French and German and Gaelic and Latin. So like they always made me sing in French, especially. So anyways, so like you can tell it's actual Gaelic that they're speaking, and they're actually speaking an Aboriginal language, which apparently that language is pretty much dead. It's like Latin, but I'm glad that this movie's keeping it alive because like, hey, like maybe 50 years from now, maybe it really will be dead, and this movie will be keeping it alive because somebody still knows it. And I thought that attention to detail was great. So great attention to detail, a really powerful movie, really great performances by everybody. Nobody was like bad. Everybody seemed like they actually lived in the 1820s, 1830s. Nobody took me out of the movie. And I think it's totally worth the watch. So I'm giving it a 9 out of 10 because it was a little lengthy. I would give it a 10 out of 10 if it wasn't so lengthy. It was a little bit, it dragged on a bit, but it's totally worth it just to watch it once.
Yeah. It's a very solid A movie, I would say.
Yeah, I'm sad it hasn't gotten more press, but I'm glad we're doing it because maybe people will want to watch it because I will say, like, I feel like I didn't hear about it and I wouldn't have heard about it. I wouldn't have wanted to watch it if I hadn't seen it on like a review channel where people mentioned it. And honestly, even the bigger names that I watch didn't mention it. It was like I think it was Amanda the Jedi on YouTube mentioned it, and I don't watch that much of her stuff, but I happened to be watching an episode and she was like, oh, it was like the Nightingale, and I had seen that movie pop up and I didn't really know what it was about, and then I went back, I was like, oh, that looks interesting. But it was all like controversial, like, oh, it's so violent, and I was like, well, but is it good? Because I can handle violence if it serves a purpose, and it does. This movie. So you really feel like you're living in 1820s Australia. It's pretty brutal, but I would highly recommend it. And I guess with that, we'll have to sign off. So I hope you had fun listening to us talk about this really depressing movie, but it's really good, and you should totally watch it. I feel like we need to throw in some fun horror movies too, or some fun movies, so we're not completely depressing.
And we definitely want you guys to, if you ever want to leave in the comments if there's a movie that you guys are like, hey, I would love to hear you guys talk about this movie, or have you seen this one? We love recommendations, not only for the blog, but just as cinephiles, as movie fans, we always want to have things on our radar because, and of course, if you just really want to hear us talk about it, I don't think me nor Katie would be against sitting down watching something and just bringing all of our thoughts to the table on it either.
Yeah, and it doesn't have to be a new movie. It doesn't have to be an old movie. It doesn't have to even be like, even though we're two girls, it doesn't have to have a feminist spin. Even though I feel like we've talked about mostly female-driven movies, but that's because we're girls. But it can be any movie, and I think it would be good to have suggestions because we're gonna go for the ones that we like. And, it might be interesting to see some movies that maybe we don't like as much, or maybe we'll find out we like them and we didn't think we were going to like them. So, Send us a comment and tell us what you want us to watch, what you want us to review. And like if you would like to hear anything different from us, comments are always welcome. I love constructive criticism as long as it's in the written form. I'm just kidding.
Please don't leave us a video message yelling at us.
No. I always take in college. I was always given my notes for performances in note form. Those are always my favorite directors because then I could go sit and if I really fucked up a scene, I could go be upset about it without anyone else knowing about it. You know, comment, let us know if you have any suggestions, anything else you want to hear about. Yeah. So we're gonna sign off. So be good, stay safe out there, people, and keep watching for more.
Bye, friends. Have a good night.
Bye. Love you guys. Thanks for watching.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye.
Watch the movies.
Thanks for listening. The Grindhouse Girls podcast is recorded by Brittany Ray and Katie Dale and edited by Katie Dale. If you have any inquiries or questions for us, please visit our website at grindhousegirlspod.com. All rights reserved.